Okay, so at this point, we're going to add an offender or a person that caused the harm. I realize we need to update some of the terminology throughout the application, so hopefully we can get to that sometime soon. So you can, to add a new offender to your client, you want to go to their offender section, which I did by just clicking offenders on the right side menu here. Then I want to click the new offender button. Don't worry about offender ID. That is there so you can see it later and it comes in handy. But Infonet will automatically assign that for you. So you just want to enter basic information about the offender, their age, gender, race, ethnicity. Notice this is different than how clients are, how you enter the same information for survivors. It's not a select all that apply. It's a multi, or it's a single category only, and one of them is multiracial. Um, it would be nice if they were consistent, but it just hasn't been a high priority, and there's other more important things we've had to do. So just pick the category that best that the offender identifies with. Relationship to victim. This is mandatory if you want to save the offender record. It's not necessarily mandatory, but if you want to save this successfully, you need to enter something in here. And that actually is also the case with age, gender, and race. Um, entering offender information at all is actually optional, but I encourage it, especially because it's really helpful to have the relationship to the victim. Um, there's different types of domestic violence. So I think a lot of folks, when they think of domestic violence, they automatically think of intimate partner. That's not the case for everyone, but I think that's common. And by including and entering these other categories, like one area we're seeing increases in is when the offender is the child, like a teen or a young adult child committing abuse. You can see how that's a completely different dynamic than intimate partner. It's other household domestic violence. So that's my pitch for entering this data, even though you may not be required to. I think it's really helpful to look at the different trends and seeing, what types of domestic violence your clients are experiencing. And that was how you would enter that. If there is any visitation, you would enter that information, state, and then county of residence. And I just saved my offender record. Now, this is also optional. This is something that the providers wanted so that they could have a little more leverage when doing systems advocacy. So if this person who caused the violence or the harm does get arrested and does enter into the criminal justice system, I can actually enter all the decision outcomes of that process. So I can indicate if there was an arrest made, I can enter the date of the arrest. I can enter, I can enter the charge, the actual arrest charge of this person. And we have a long list here. So I'll summarize it. There's 3 groups of alphabetized types of charges. The first group are those that are most common among the survivors you're serving. So they're shaded pink. They're domestic battery offenses for the most part. The second, or the blue group, are other offenses that are more about sexual violence. And then the third group, see how they start alphabetizing again, are other arrest charges that we see from time to time among domestic violence offenders. Criminal trespass is an example. But we tried to order these where these are probably the most common, the next most common, and then these sometimes come into play too. I believe there is an other charge if the charge this person is being arrested for is not available on this list. Illinois Criminal Code is ridiculously long, and we could never fit everything on here. So we tried to pick the ones that would be most commonly used. Um, So I'm going to go ahead and just select a charge, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor, and the date of that charge. Because it's not always the same date they were arrested, right? Sometimes there's a charge and then there's a warrant and then they're arrested a short time later. Now, if this case makes it to the state's attorney level, you can enter that as well. We're going to say the state's attorney did file charges, what the charge was, because as you probably know, it's not always the same as what they were arrested for. Maybe they were arrested for aggravated domestic battery, but the prosecutor feels as though they only have enough evidence to charge for simple domestic battery. The charge date, I'm making this trial go very fast, the disposition or the outcome of that case, and the date. And then if this person, I'm going to change my disposition. I'm going to say they were pled guilty. I can also enter what sentence that person received. So I'm going to enter the sentence date, what their sentence was, length of years, months, and days. And if there are multiple sentences, I can add those. Let's say probation for 5 years. Now, I'm not aware of anybody that requires this type of data. I'm going to go ahead and save. But what you can do with this is use it as additional leverage when you're doing systems advocacy. Many of you know you can talk to police chiefs, judges, prosecutors until you're blue in the face. You're going to have a more powerful argument when you have data to back up what you're describing is happening to the survivors you serve. So that's the incentive to enter this data. You can enter multiple arrests, multiple prosecutor charges, multiple sentences. You can also enter multiple offenders. Not every survivor has just one offender, so feel free to add as many as you need to. Okay, so that concludes the offender section.